All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor for Tafshin Pei Hey, the year 5785, the Tilts Mishpacha Beretz Yisrael, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos for this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves Haba Aleinu L'Tova, the Kelman family, in memory of Amit ben David Levi, Zichron Livracha, the brother of Itai Levi, a brave and holy soldier who was killed in Gaza on the first night of Hanukkah. Our week of learning sponsors, Zevi and Shoshi Daniel, Ili Nishmas, Zevi's father, Yitzchak Yisrael, ben Rafal Noach Yosef, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, all the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. The Rebbe Shalom Shemir Hashem bring home our precious hostages b'shalom and b'karav, and should allow our holy soldiers to be successful b'chol ma'aseh yedehem. But with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chof Gimel. We're going to start the new parak today, but first we have some unfinished business. So we are up to Chav Beis on Beis 22b, and we left off Amar Rav Masna, which is the third why. Actually, we could just start from the second why line of Tanan Nami. So as you remember again, the Gemara was introducing us to the idea according to Mishnah, and the Mishnah was speaking about the haircut schedule of great and important people, and the need, the higher the position you occupy, the more intense your personal grooming habits have to be in order to present well. In order to present well to the general populace. So I'll say, I was just thinking about this yesterday a little bit, that this is also in line with a theme that we discussed not so long ago, that in general people form their initial opinions about other people just based on external appearances. That's, even though we'd like to say, remember we spoke about this, we'd like to say that we're not judgmental, we are incredibly judgmental, and we are actually superficially judgmental. And the way we form our initial appreciation or impressions about someone is how they dress, how they look, how they're groomed. And again, Chalish Baruch Hu understands this, Halacha understands this, and therefore the Halacha says is that the greater the position of prominence that you occupy, the more groomed you must be, so that you will be able to command the initial respect of people. So the king has to be groomed. The Kohen Gadol has to be groomed. A Kohen Hedyot has to be groomed. Now, obviously, in line with your station will depend on what those grooming habits need to be. So the last thing we left off with was that a regular Kohen, I will say, and that's why, by the way, you begin to see this, like the Gemara says, that any Talmud Chacham who walks around with a stain on his clothing is Chayiv Misa. It's a very strong statement. Torah scholar who walks around with a stained article of clothing is liable to death. What's the logic? Because when a person sees a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be an ambassador of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you represent God, you better dress the part. So therefore the Kohen, the Gemara is discussing now, the Kohen has to get a haircut at least once every 30 days in order that he's well groomed. So the Gemara was talking about this. Tnan Nami Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. So as remember again, the Gemara was talking about the idea. We had a comparison of Pera, Gzir Shav Pera from Naziros. Just like Naziros, Stam Naziros is 30 days. So too again, a regular Kohen cannot allow his hair to grow for any longer than 30 days. V'hasam Minalan. Amrad Masna the Amakra Kodesh Yihya B'Gematria Tzlasin Havu, because the pasuk says Kodesh Yihya, and Yihya in Gematria is 30. Okay, Amrad Papa Abaye Ema Lo Lir Buklal. So maybe the halacha by a Kohen should be that he can't allow his hair to grow at all, or maybe he should have to cut it all of the time. Amrlei Iksev lo yishalechu pera kidika amrit. So if it would have just said, literally again, there should be no growth of the locks of his hair, then I would say, you're right, Kohen has to constantly get a haircut. Hashta dechsev upera, but now that it says para, we would say like this: there should be a growth. The Kohen is supposed to have hair, but the hair is not supposed to grow. We'll call it in a wild or uncontrollable way. So, and then again, you you add in there the Gzeir Shava of Pera to Nazir, teaches us that just like Stam Naziros is 30 days, so to the Kohen cannot allow his hair to grow for longer than 30 days. So I say, now listen to this. The Gemara says, Ihachi, if this is the case, so now what we've established is that a regular Kohen is obligated to get a haircut once every 30 days. If that's the case, the Gemara says something very interesting. Ihachi ha'idna nami. Why don't we say that even now, even now, or both say now means now, in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash, a Kohen should be obligated to cut his hair once every 30 days. Now listen to this. Dumya diyayin. It should be the same thing as wine. Because after all, said this is actually fascinating. The Gemara says, Ma yayin bizman bia. Sorry, dumya diyayin. So let's say, so now here's what's interesting. Technically speaking, the prohibition of shtuye yayin, right, that a Kohen cannot do the avoda while under the influence. That's the halacha. Now remember, what's the definition of under the influence for avoda, for temple service purposes? Revius. A revius, not even drunkenness. A Kohen cannot drink a revius of wine while doing the avodas. If he drinks a revius, which is not a lot of wine, 3.5 ounces, he cannot do the avoda. So the Gemara, listen to this. Dumi diyayin, ma yayin bizman bia huda aser, shlo bizman bia shari, af peruei rosh bizman bia aser, shlo bizman bia shari. Because we'll see, you're right, it's comparable to wine. But remember, when is a Kohen not allowed to drink wine? He's not allowed to drink wine when he's on call. But if he's not, so zman bia, zman mia in this context means that halacha. Look, if you look at Rashi says, "V'dumi diyayin tisamoch le v'yayin lo yishtu bevoam makish puerosh l'shtu yayin ksib yayin bevoam." So remember again, when is there a prohibition to drink wine? When the Kohen is in service? Now remember again, Abba says we mentioned this in yesterday's daf also. The Kohen, remember the Kohanic groups are split up into mishmoros, right? Each mishmar, 24 mishmoros. Each mishmar serves one day. So halacha l'maisa again, Kohanim can only not drink wine when they are on call. So the Gemara says the same way that a Kohen can't drink wine bizman bia, so too again the issues of hair cutting or the obligation of hair cutting once every 30 days also only applies bizman bia. So this the Gemara says, and furthermore, shelo bizman bia shari, v'yayin. So the Gemara says, fine, v'yayin shelo bizman bia shari. Now listen to this. So you're telling me now that when a Kohen is not on call, when it's not his shift, he's allowed to drink wine. But to get ready for this. But we've actually seen this Gemara again, but it's so dramatic. That time we learned, Rabbi Omer Ani. Listen to this. Rabbi says, Kohanim asurim lishtos yayin liolam. Get ready for this. Kohanim really should never be able to drink wine. They should be forever prohibited to drink wine. Now, what's the issue over here? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Keep your finger in the Gemara. Take a look at Rashi. So actually, Rabbi Omer ani koin asr l'shtos yayin liolam reisha debraisa katani koin amake mishmarto umishmeres beis av shalo asr b'yayin ka'ol sahayom. Af bizman hazeh. So listen to this. So let me translate it, then we'll put it into context. So the beginning of the Brisa says like this: a Kohen who knows which Kohanic family he came from, and who knew when his family would serve in the Beis Hamikdash, would be usher to drink wine during what would have been his designated shift. He says, calls af bizman hazeh makir mishmarto ve'eno makir beis av shalo, asr kol also Shabbos, eno makir lo mishmarto ve'lo mishmares beis av shalo, asr l'shtos yayin li'olam, shema achshav zmanahu ve'ishlachush shema yibana beis hamikdash. Listen to this. Essentially what Rebbe says is as follows. If you were to have a Kohen, and the Kohen were to know his exact Kohanic family, to know when his Kohanic family, what shift, which week his family would serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and out of that week, which day his family would have served, that Kohen is usher to drink wine on that day. If he doesn't know which day, he can't drink wine that week. If he doesn't know which family, he can't drink wine at all. Now, what do we? So, little Rabbi is saying that Kohen cannot drink wine at all. What are we concerned about? We're concerned about, again, Emir Hashem Mashiach is going to come. The Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. And maybe that Kohen is going to be activated for instantaneous service. So the issue just is, if he's under the influence, he won't be able to do his avoda. So essentially what Rebbe is saying is, if you don't, now again, so just understand, if you know exactly what family you're from, which mishmar you're a part of, which shift you're a part of, and what day of the week your family would have served, so then only that week and that day is going to be problematic for you. But if you don't know your family and you don't know your shift, then you don't know when you would be activated. Mashiach could come at any time. The Beis HaMikdash could be rebuilt at any time, and a Kohen needs to be ready for service. Therefore, Rebbe says, Kohanim can't drink wine. It's wild. It's wild. But watch this. Aval ma'aseh. Rabbi says, what can I do? Shetakanaso kilkaloso. Which literally means that ultimately, again, the state of disrepair is the very reason why Kohanim can drink wine presently. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, Rabbi Omer Ani, im banu lochosh shema yibana asher b'yayin li'olam, va'afilu umakir she'enu achshav zman mishmarto shema yibana v'chol hakodim v'shtachech ayel va'avid. So Rabbi says, but the truth is, even if a Kohen does know his family and his shift, still he shouldn't be able to drink wine, because first of all, who's to say that when the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, we're going to follow the same order of Kohanic service of what was? Maybe we'll activate a brand new service in here. Okay. Aval ma'aseh shetakanaso kalkalos wa morashi churban habayis shekalkalan v'irev sider mishmarteon mishmorosehen shehaya osran b'yayin bizman mishmartan umatirin shelo bizman mishmartan hu tiknon achshav l'shtos yayin. So essentially, but now what are you going to do? So the Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed. No one knows what the order is going to be. No one knows how the Kohanim are going to be activated. And look at this, and look at that last line of Rashi. Therefore, he says, "Achshav lishtos yayin li'olam delo chayish shema yibane pitom." Rashi says, because Rabbi says, we're not choshesh that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt suddenly. So just understand what's happened over here. Rebbe says, really in a vacuum, Kohanim should not be able to drink wine, bizman hazeh, presently. Why? Because there's the possibility the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, and it's going to be rebuilt quickly, and who knows what the order of Kohanic services is going to be. There's another issue, which is that I would imagine most Kohanim, if not all Kohanim, are going to be Tmeim, right? They are going to be Tamei, just as a result of generations out of Paraduma. So therefore, who knows who's going to be needed, what they're going to be needed for. So really, Rebbe says, in reality, no Kohanim should be able to drink wine. But what can you do? He says, but what should we do? He says, the Lashon over here is, Shetakan aval ma'aseh, shetakanaso kilkalaso. That the very takana for this is the very state of disrepair. In other words, what Rabbi says is, we're not concerned that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt immediately. So just understand, I just want to point out what's unfolding over here. What's unfolding over here is something absolutely dramatic, which is, there's two schools of thought, or two schools of redemptive thought. There's one school of thought that says, the Beis HaMikdash can be rebuilt at any moment, and therefore Kohanim have to be on guard. They have to be ready. And therefore, really, Kohanim shouldn't drink wine. That's possibility one. Possibility two is another school of thought, which is that we're not choshesh for instantaneous rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Things are going to take time, and therefore, Kohanim could drink wine. And when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, we'll figure it out later on. So just understand these two different mindsets and two different models of Geula. Does a Yid live in a constant state of immediate preparation of getting ready for the Mikdash, and it could just happen? And again, the Lashon over here is, Lashon of the end of Rashi is, Delo chayish shema yibana pitom. Pitom means what? Suddenly, immediately. Suddenly. It's not that I don't believe in Geula. Of course I believe in Geula. I don't believe in what we'll call Geula pitomit, right? Immediate or sudden Geula. Geula is a process. So again, even if Mashiach comes today, right? Achak yelo, not b'chol daka sheyavo. I don't wait for Mashiach every moment will come. Achak yelo, b'chol yom sheyavo. Today, it's a long day. It's a long day. I don't believe in Geula pit omit, in instantaneous or immediate Geula, sudden Geula. Geula is a process. So also just understand, here, this machlokes is playing out from a halachic perspective, right? Can a Kohen drink wine, not drink wine? But just from a hashkafic perspective, how incredibly profound this is. We'll come back to this in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Michlal, to Rabbanan Asri. Now, Rebbe is the one who says, therefore, I believe Kohanim could go ahead and drink wine, because l'shema yibana, the lochayish shema yibana pitom. Rebbe says, I'm not concerned that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt suddenly. So because of that, Kohanim could drink wine. Apparently the Rabbanan disagree, and the Rabbanan say, no, the Beis HaMikdash could be rebuilt suddenly, and therefore Kohanim can drink wine. So the Gemara says, Hasam, so now remember, Hasam, Hainu Taimah Meheri Yibana HaMikdash, Uba'inan Kohen HaRei Lavod V'Leka. So therefore the Rabbanan hold, Mehera Yibana HaMikdash. What does Mehera Yibana HaMikdash mean? That the Beis HaMikdash can be rebuilt quickly and suddenly, and therefore Kohanim have to be on alert, and therefore a Kohen can't drink wine. So just to understand how profound this ideological machlokes is, Rebbe l'shema yibane pitom lo chayshinan. We're not concerned the Beis HaMikdash is going to rebuild suddenly. The Rabbanan, we are concerned the Beis HaMikdash is going to rebuild suddenly. The Rabbanan, Kohanim can't drink wine. Rebbe, Kohanim can drink wine. Sorry, just the opposite. Rebbe, Kohanim can drink wine. Rabbanan, Kohanim can't drink wine. So hachanami, but but if that's the case, at least according to the Rabbanan, Kohanim should have to get a haircut every 30 days as well, just to be ready. Else their personal grooming. So again, haircutting is not a big deal, because even if the Beis HaMikdash is suddenly rebuilt, what happens? You run to the barber, get a haircut, and that's it. Shalom al Yisrael. So wine shouldn't be a big deal either. Why? Because what happens if the Kohen drank a little bit too much and Mashiach comes? What does he need to do? Just take a nap. Just take a nap, you'll be fine, you'll be good to go. So the Amar of Acha, Derech Mil V'Shinahu Kolshu, Mefigin Esayayin, walking and apparently a little bit of a nap, take away the effects of alcohol. We said about this, Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Avua, Lo Shono Ela Sheshas K'dei Revius. When does a short nap take away the effects of alcohol? When you only drank a little bit. But if you drank more than a revius, actually sleep could amplify the effects of wine. Ravashi says, here's the difference. So drinking wine, right, or doing avoda under the influence, which undermines the effectiveness of the avoda, that's when the Rabbanan said, even today Kohanim can't drink wine. So apparently, as much as a Kohen is supposed to be groomed, if he hasn't had a haircut in the last 30 days, it does not undermine the effectiveness of the avoda. Meisei, the Gemara says, is that true? These are the things that are chai misa. It says if a Kohen does the avoda without properly cut hair or under the influence, is chai misa. So bishlam shtu yayin dichsiv yayin v'shecher al teisht ata uvanach v'los amusu. So I understand when it comes to wine, the pasuk says don't drink wine when doing the avodah in order that you won't die. Ala pruei rosh minalan. But how do I know that a Kohen who does the avodah without being properly groomed is chayiv misa? The iskish shtu yayin lepruei rosh, because there's a comparison between wine consumption and hair cutting. Ksiv v'rasham lo yigalechu pero lo yishalechu. Ksiv v'yayin lo yishtu. Psukim are juxtaposed. Mashtu yayin b'misa aprei rosh b'misa. So just like again, if a Kohen does the avodah while under the influence, he's chayv misa. So too again, if he does it without personal grooming, right, without having his hair cut, he's also chayv misa. Umina, and we can learn from this. Mashtu yayin demachli avodah. Just like if he goes ahead and he does the avodah while under the influence, it undermines the avoda, in other words, it invalidates the avoda of purei rosh, the machli avoda. So too again, if he does the avoda without his haircut, it also invalidates the avoda. Which the Gemara says kasha. You're right, that's a kasha, because it sounds like over here that whether that hair cutting and drinking wine is the same thing, namely that failure to go ahead and adhere to either of these strictures undermines the effectiveness of the avoda. Hi, adlo asi cheskel man amra. So by the way, up until what's interesting about this is this whole hair cutting thing. It's coming from Yechezkel. So obviously Yechezkel didn't invent new halachas. So this must have been a halacha before Yechezkel said it. Where did we know this halacha from? So according to that same logic, Hada Amra Rav Chisda, Davar Zemitoras Moshe Rabbeinu lo lamadnu, Ad Sheba Yechezkel v'limdunu, Kol ben Nechar Arale v'Aral Basal Yavel Mikdashi l'Sharseni. So remember again, there's another pasuk from Yechezkel. Yechezkel says any kohen that doesn't have a bris can't come and go ahead and do the avodah. avoda. So Yechezkel says it Adlo by Yechezkel man Amra. Before Yechezkel came along, how do we know it? How do we know it? Ela Gemara Gemirila was Yechezkel Vasmucha Akra. It was Halacha Moshe Sinai. And again, Halacha Moshe Sinai originally. Then Yechezkel was the one who codified it in a pasuk. Hachanami Gemara Gemirila va'asi Yechezkel va'asmucha Akra. So too again, when it comes to the haircutting, this was a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that a kohen has to have a haircut once every regular kohen has to have a haircut once every 30 days. It was halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and Yechezkel was the one who put it into a pasuk. So the Gemara says, "The chigamri halacha l'misa la'chuli avoda lo gemir." Fine. My kisus, kvay kisum yikasmu esra shehem. What does it mean when it says essentially again? It's talking about the hair cutting again. That the kohen is supposed to cut his hair. What does that mean? Tana kamin tisporis lulainis. It means that the kohen. Now, what kind of haircut are we talking about? The kohen is supposed to get like a lulainis haircut. What's a lulainis haircut? My tisporis lulainis. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel tisporis yechida. It's a very unique type of haircut that the kohen is supposed to get. Hechidami. What does it look like? Amar Rashi Roshel shalzeh b'tzad ikaro shalzeh. It literally means the hairs line up exactly. That literally, again, the tip of one hair reaches the base of the other hair. That's how the haircut looks. So the Gemara says, Shalu as Rebbe, Ezu tispar shel Kohen Gadol. So they asked Rebbe, what is the unique haircut of the Kohen Gadol? Amar lahem, tzu uru'u mitispores shel ben Elasha. Go and look at my son-in-law's haircut. Right, Rebbe's son-in-law was this man Ben Elasha. Go look at my son-in-law's haircut. He has the right kind of haircut. Tanya Rebbe Omer Lo achina pizra Ben Elasha es ma'osav elakadei laharos botispar shel Kohen Gadol. So apparently Ben Elasha spent a lot of money on his haircuts. Right, he wasn't like a supercuts guy. This was like salon quality. Right? Why did Ben Elasha spend so much money on his haircut? So apparently he did it to show what the haircut of the Kohen Gadol was. That was he spent his money on that, and therefore Rebbe said, go look at that haircut. So we'll say, so bottom line, what comes out of here is like this. So based on Yechezkel, essentially again, a Kohen can't, well, also from the Torah, Kohen can't go ahead and do the avodah after he's consumed a revius of wine. He also can't do the avoda if he doesn't have the proper haircut. For a Kohen Gadol, that's once every week, and for a regular Kohen, that is once every 30 days. Now, what's interesting, and the Gemara doesn't seem to give clarity on that, is we understand that if a Kohen does the avoda while under the influence of alcohol, after having consumed the revius, the avoda is invalid. The shaila is, if he does the avoda without proper haircut, adhering to proper haircut guidelines, does that undermine the avoda or not? So for that, we seem to have conflicting brises. So we'll say just one last word before I move on to the next parak about this machlokes Rebbe and the Rabbanon. Right. So remember, according to the Rabbanon, a Kohen even today can't drink a revius of wine. Why? Right? Because as the Gemara said, Mehera Yibane Beis Hamikdash. Because according to the Rabbanon, the Beis Hamikdash can be rebuilt suddenly, and we need Kohanim to be ready for service. If a Kohen is drinking, so the Lamaisa again, he's not ready for service. Rebbe says, again, the lashon of Rashi about Rebbe is Lo Chayish Shema Yibane Pitom. Rebbe is not concerned for the possibility that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt suddenly. So the Rabbanon, Choshesh, that it's going to be rebuilt suddenly. Rebbe, not Choshesh, is going to be rebuilt suddenly. I will say, such a mind-blowing machlokes. So I will say, so who's right? So, well, clearly, Kohanim drink wine today. So clearly, we are siding with Rebbe, right? That interestingly enough, l'shema yibana pitom lo chayshinon. We are not concerned about the sudden rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. So I will say, it sounds like a little bit of a downer. That's like, I always thought that we are choshesh, that it's going to be rebuilt suddenly. So I will say, so there's a beautiful insight that we really have. You have to let me go on after this. I will say, but there's an incredible insight. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. Okay, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau goes ahead and says in Halach Ma'anya, he says Hashata Hacha L'Shana Haba L'Shana Haba Ba'arad Yisrael. This year we are here. Next year we'll be in Eretz Yisrael. The end of Halach Ma'anya. Beautiful idea. So Rabbi Lau says something so beautiful. Rabbi Lau says, Why don't we say like Hashat Hachan? Now we're here Lamachar Ba'arad Yisrael. Tomorrow will be in Eretz Yisrael. Or Hashat Avdi. This year we're slaves. L'Shana Haba B'nei Chorah. Next year we'll be free. What do you mean? Sorry, tomorrow will be free. What do you mean next year? Why next year? Why not tomorrow? And Rabbi Lau says something so beautiful. Rabbi Lau explains that a Yid believes that dramatic and overwhelming instantaneous change can be just that, instantaneous. But more often than not, great things in life are gradual processes. So do I believe that today I'm here and tomorrow I'll be in Eretz Yisrael? Absolutely, I believe it could happen. I can believe that today I'm here and today I'm in Eretz Yisrael. I can believe all of that. But Rabbi says it's just not usually the way that it works. The greater the change, usually the more gradual it has to be. So again, Hashat Hachan, now I'm in Galus. I believe that by next year I'll be in Eretz Yisrael. This year maybe I'm enslaved to something. Next year I believe that I'm free. Again, could the change be instantaneous? Absolutely, it can. But it's just not probable. The probability is the greater the change, the more gradual it's going to have to be. And I will say, it's true as a people. So that's why halacha l'maisa and hashkafa l'maisa, we accept Rebbe's position. I believe in the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, but I don't necessarily believe that, or we don't necessarily take the approach that it's going to be pit o mit, that it's going to be instantaneous. Rather, it's going to be gradual. It's going to take, Geula takes time. Geula takes time. So, Kohen, you can enjoy the L'chaim, because chances are the Beis Hamikdash is not going to be rebuilt in this moment. It can, anything could happen, but generally, the greater the change, the more gradual it's going to have to be. And I both say, this is so true in our personal lives as well. All of us have things about ourselves or about our lives that we want to change. And sometimes we want that change to be instantaneous. But it's important to understand that we paskin halacha l'maisa like Rebbe. L'shema yibane pitom lo chayshinon. That again, the greater the change, the more gradual it's going to be, and the more time it's going to take. Can you affect instantaneous change? Absolutely, it's possible. It's just not probable. So both halacha l'maisa and hashkafa l'maisa, we believe that the greater the change, the more runway you have to be able to give yourself as an individual and as well as a people. Incredible, incredible. Hadron alach, kohen gadol. We'll say shkoyach. New parak. Dinim amanas l'shlosha. Salach is monetary law. Back to Sanhedrin. Back to Sanhedrin. Monetary law is adjudicated by a basin of three. Zeh bar lo acha v'zeh bar lo acha. So we'll say the Mishnah's wording is very ambiguous. I'm going to work through it in the Gemara. So literally, Rashi says it sounds like, so let's say Reuven and Shimon have a legal dispute, right? So what's going to happen? So now it sounds like Reuven chooses a basin for himself, and Shimon chooses a basin for himself. Ushnein borin lahen od echad divrei meir. And it sounds like again, and then they choose a third basin. Those two choose a third. That's how Rashi is understanding it initially. These are Rabbi Meir. Chacham say no. Shnei dayanim borin lahen od echad. So ultimately, again, there are two judges. There are two judges, and those two judges pick a third. Again, we'll see exactly in the Gemara what's happening. Zeh posel daino shalzeh, v'zeh posel daino shalzeh. So again, both Reuven and Shimon have the ability to invalidate or to refuse. Really, posel means to passel, to refuse the judge of the other. The Rebbe Meir. Chacham say no. It must say, when is that true? That one party could go ahead and refuse the judge of the other side. Bizman shemedi alein raya shein krovin o psulin. So again. So let's say Shimon picks a judge, right? Reuven picks a judge. So Reuven could invalidate Shimon's judge, and Shimon could invalidate Reuven's judge. That's what Meir says. Chacham say no. The only time you could invalidate someone else's judge is when halacha l'maisa, again, there's grounds for invalidation. Somebody's a relative. Somebody has a conflict of interest. But if halacha l'maisa, again, they were otherwise valid, right, or otherwise experts, you can't just invalidate someone for no reason. Meir says again, either side could invalidate the other side's witnesses. Say no. When is that? So again, Moshe is ongoing machlokes. Say no. The only time you could invalidate someone else's witnesses is when there's grounds for invalidation. They're related to one of the parties, or they have a conflict of interest. But if they were kosher, ultimately, again, you cannot go ahead and invalidate them. Incredible. All right, so now let's analyze the first part of the Mishnah. So what is the meaning? What is the case in the first part of the Mishnah, right, where we say Dine Mamanas B'Shlosha, right? When we speak about this idea that in general monetary law is 3, and then again it says Ze bar lo echav v'ze bar lo. What does this mean? So the Gemara says, so Ze bar lo echav v'ze bar lo echad b'tlas asagi. So again, if we go with the Havamin of the Mishnah, the Havamin of the Mishnah is Reuven chooses a Beis Din, and Shimon chooses a Beis Din, and somehow those two, but they didn't choose a third Beis Din. The Gemara says, I don't understand. All you need is one Beis Din. All you need is 3 people. Why are we getting a whole million of people involved in this? That's what it means to say. Kishezeh bar lo Beis Din echad, v'zeh bar lo Beis Din echad, shnehen borin lo lahen od echad. So what it sounds like is like this. So I'll say, so not only do Reuven and Shimon have a dispute about whatever the monetary matter is, but what? But they also have a dispute about which Beis Din to go to. So Reuven could choose his Beis Din, and Shimon could choose his Beis Din, and together those two Batei Din could choose a third Beis Din. Okay, va'afilu love matzim akiv. So that Shabbos says. So now, what it sounds like is either party has a right to refuse the Beis Din of the other side. So let's say Reuven lent Shimon $10,000. Now there's a loan dispute. Is it true then that even Shimon, the borrower, has a right to object to the Beis Din of the lender? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar lo shanu ela malva avalova kofano savadan biiro. So we'll say, no. Who has the right to object? Only a lender. But a borrower in general, both say this has to do with the idea, Rashi points out, that Eved love li ish malva. The borrower is always considered to be at the whim of the lender. So the halacha is if the lender chooses a Beis Din, that's where the borrower's got to go. The Gemara says, "No, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about the courts of Surya." So we'll say, so apparently, Rashi points out over here, so apparently, the courts of Surya in Babel were notorious, unfortunately, for not really being so erudite, right? They weren't such experts. So therefore, again, if you were called to a court in Syria, you had the right to object to say, or to request a change of venue. You know, I don't really want to adjudicate my case over here. This is not the place for adjudication. In that kind of case, even the borrower could object. Aval mumchin lo. So we'll say, what it sounds like is that if the borrower was summoned to a court of experts, he would not be permitted to object to, or he would not be permitted to request a change of venue. Rapapa says, no. Even if the borrower was called to a Beis Din of mumchin, he could still go ahead and object. Kigon beidina de Rav Huna, Rav Chisda, de Kamerle, mi kamet shachanalach. Because again, the borrower could always say to the lender, "What's the big deal? I just want to change a venue. We don't have to go to a different city, but I just want a different Beis Din. It's not a tircha for you to come to a different Beis Din." Tnan v'cham necham say shnei dayanim borin lahen od echad. So remember, the Chum say you have two, same first case in the Mishnah. 2 judges choose a third. Beis Din, Beis Din basra de pasli luhu. Azlu ubar luhu beidina achrini. See, here's the problem. The problem is, so let's play this out. So Reuven chooses a Beis Din. Shimon chooses a Beis Din. Shimon says, Reuven, I don't want your Beis Din. Reuven says, Shimon, I don't want your Beis Din. And now, so the 2 invalidated, but they didn't go and choose a third. Doesn't make any sense. V'od, my zeb bar lo echad, zeb bar lo echad. Ella, hakikam, that's what it means to say. Here we go. Kishezeb bar lo dayin echad, v'zeb bar lo dayin echad, shnehen bar lahen od echad. Oh, okay. So now the Gemara says, no. I'm going to tell you what the process is. In general, if Reuven and Shimon could agree on a Beis Din, that is the best. But what if they can't agree on a Beis Din? So we'll say what happens under those circumstances. Reuven will choose a dayan, right? He gets to choose a judge. Shimon chooses a judge, and then those 2 judges choose a third, right? Those 2 chosen judges choose a third. That is a process through which you could assemble a Beis Din to adjudicate this case. So Mashna da'avdi hachi Amar Rabbi Zera mitoch shezeh bar lo dayin echad v'zeh bar lo dayin echad u'shnein borin lahen od echad yatsa hadin la'amito. Because Rabbi say this is a good way to ensure that the matter is adjudicated properly, right? Everybody feels they have a voice, right? Because Reuven got to choose one judge, Shimon got to choose one judge, so everyone has a voice in this process, and therefore Allah L'maisa again, and those two judges choose a third, Yatsa Din Lamito, everyone is confident in this type of judicial proceeding. Okay, bros, we're going to speak more about this idea. Now, say, just to be clear, this is not generally like the ideal way that we adjudicate cases, right? The ideal way is we go to, right, parties agree on a Beis Din, but you could have a situation where parties don't agree on a Beis Din, and so everybody gets to choose one judge, each party gets to choose one judge, and those two choose a third. Fine. Racham Necham says follows, Nema b'Rav Yehuda Amarav kamiflagi. What is Rav Yehuda Amarav? Eina edim chosmin al ashtar, ela imken yodin mi chosem imayel. So what Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, in general, witnesses only sign on a document if they know the other. In other words, one witness will only sign if he knows who else is signing on this document. Rabbi Meir, less late Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Meir does not subscribe to Rabbi Yehuda's position, and therefore Rabbi Meir says that halacha l'maisa, each party can invalidate the other party's witnesses because he can say I didn't know who else was signing. So the Gemara says, on the other hand, Amarav Rabbanan is Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, but is that to say that the Rabbanan hold the Rabbi Yehuda name of Rav? No, the Kuli Alma is Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. No, but in general, everyone agrees with Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. In other words, witnesses never sign unless they know who else is signing on the document, which makes sense. The Gemara says, so Amarav V'das Haday. Kuli Alma Islu Rabbi Yehuda Amarav V'das Hadayanin lo pligi deba'inan. And also, ultimately, again, you require the das of the dayanim when signing. Key pligi. So where is the machlokes? Where is the machlokes? Das baledinin. Do you require the das of the litigants when signing? So take a look. Fine. So Rabbi Meir Savar, das baledinin nami ba'inan. Rabbi Meir holds that you also require the das of the litigants. Rabbanan Savri, das hadayonet ba'inan, das baledinin lo ba'inan. The Rabbanan on the other hand holds that you need the das of the judges, but you don't necessarily need the das of the litigants themselves. So Gufa, let's analyze. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, Eina edim chosmin alashtar tanya namiyachi kach hayu nikiyeh das shushaim osim. We'll say it's incredible. So it's interesting over here, the lashon of nikiyeh hadas. So nikiyeh hadas literally means those of pure intent. So those of pure intent in Yerushalayim osin lo hayu chosmin alashtar ela imkin yodin mi chosim imayin. So they would never sign on a document unless, of course, they knew who else was signing on the document with them. V'lo hayu yoshvin bedin ela imkin yodin mi yoshev imayin. They would not be part of a Beis Din unless, of course, they knew who else was part of the Beis Din with them. And they would not participate in a meal unless, of course, they knew who else was participating. I was about to say, there's actually something quite beautiful over here. So what made them Nikiyah Hadas? They understood that who you keep company with has a fundamental impact on the person you become. So therefore, they wouldn't even say, like working backwards, they're not going to sit at a Su'udah unless, of course, they know everyone else who's coming. I'm not coming unless I know the rest of the invite list. Why? Because who you break bread with has an impact on who you are. Furthermore, they wouldn't sit on a Beis Din, right? Unless, of course, they knew who else. They wouldn't sign on a document unless, of course, they knew who else. Because who you keep company with on any level has a fundamental impact on the person you are. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Zeh posal dayano shazeh. So remember again. So another machlokes is in the Mishnah. So right, Rabbi Meir said each party could invalidate the judge of the other side. And the Chacham said no. The only time you could invalidate a judge is when it was possible a judge is if you have grounds. He's conflict of interest, he's a relative. So the Gemara says, Kol kamine de pasal daini. So could Rabbi Meir really saying, does each side have the ability to invalidate judges on the other side? So Rabbi Yochanan, Barako shebesurya shanu, aval mumchin lo. So again, so now interesting, Rabbi Yochanan says, no, what are we talking about? This is apparently, again, unfortunately, the Syrian courts had a very bad bad rep, right? Very bad reputation, and apparently they weren't necessarily well versed. So in a Syrian court, you could invalidate the judges. But if it was a group of experts, again, you could only invalidate based on actual grounds. So the Gemara says, Aval mumchin lo. Hamidik tani seva chum say, when is that? Bizman shemevi raya, shein krovin or psulin. The chum say, when can you invalidate judges? Only if you could bring a proof that halacha l'maisa, their relatives, or they have a conflict of interest, or some other psul. But if they were known to be experts, you can't invalidate them. Now, what do we see from there? Mechlal, Rabbi Meir mumchin nami kamar. So that sounds like Rabbi Meir says that you could even invalidate judges who are experts. To which the Gemara says, no. Haki kamar. If the judges were ksherim, so we'll say ksherim means what? They're not related, and there's no known psul. Even if they're not recognized experts, they're accepted as experts, and therefore cannot be invalidated. Tashma, Amar Meir. They said to Meir as follows: Lo kol himenu sheposal dayin shemum chel rabim. So again, the Brisa says, says to Meir that one party can't invalidate a judge who is known to be a mumcha, who is known to be an expert. So the Gemara says, Ema lo kol himenu sheposal dayin shemchu rabim aleihem. So we'll say this is fascinating. What the Gemara is introducing to us is as follows: What does it mean to be an expert? What it means to be an expert is to be someone who is accepted by the general populace. So I will say, understand, it is accepted, the idea that sometimes Batei Din are not going to have the greatest experts in the world. But as long as those Dayanim are trusted by the general public, they are vested with expert-like status. So as long as you have judges who are generally accepted by everyone, even if we recognize they're not the greatest Talmidei Chacham in the world, but they're accepted by everyone, halacha l'maisa, they have the status of experts and can only be invalidated if you show that either they're related or there is an active conflict of interest. That supports this. Le'olam posel v'holich ad sheikablu alav beis din shemumchel divrei rabim. You can invalidate judges, but once the judges have been accepted by the general populace, that they know what they're talking about, right? And they are proper individuals. They have the status of experts and can only be invalidated based on specific grounds. But one second, witnesses are also considered to be like mumchin. In general, witnesses are also considered to have credibility and accepted. Yet, Rabbi Meir says that each side can invalidate the other's witnesses. Could it be that a holy mouth would say such a thing like this? Tanu, a dough. What can you invalidate? You can invalidate a single witness. A dough lamai. What good is a single witness for? If you want to say that it's for monetary purposes, Rachmana Pasle, one witness in Eid Echad doesn't do anything by dinei mamanis. Ila Shavua, and if it's for an oath, Hemenu Mehemen. Einachinami, an Eid Echad is believed to generate an oath obligation. Can betray like two witnesses. The Olam Lamaman, we're talking about for monetary purposes. But what good does an Eid Echad do for monetary purposes? We'll say second to last line of the page. The Kable Aleke betray. Oh, what are you talking? What are we talking about? We're talking about Reuben and Shimon are having a monetary dispute, and there's an Eid Echad, and they both agree to accept the testimony of an Eid Echad and vest him with the same credibility as if two witnesses would have had. So the Gemara says, "My Kamash, so what are we being taught over here? Timatzi Haderbei, that after hearing his testimony, they could choose to renege and not trust him like two witnesses." The Gemara says, "But we learned that Tanina, Amarlo Naaman." And listen to this. This is fascinating. Naaman alai Abba, Naaman alai Avicha, Naaman and alai Gimoroi Bakar. So we'll say, let's say again, Reuben and Shimon have a court case, and let's say again, Reuven's father, they want to appoint Reuven's father as a judge. So as long as both parties agree that they agree to accept Reuven's father as a judge, even though obviously he's related to one of the parties, he's allowed to serve as a judge. Similarly, if they decide to appoint a beis din, right, and it's a beis din of three shepherds, now bless you, now shepherds weren't generally known to be the greatest Talmidei Chachamim, but if they agree to accept three shepherds, then it's agreed. Rabbi Meir says, Yachal Achzer Bo. Rabbi Meir says, but however, again, if they change their mind afterwards, they realize Reuven's father is really not a good dayan, or the three shepherds really are just shepherds and don't know what they're talking about, so they could change their mind. Chacham say no. Chacham say no. Once you commit to a process, you are committed to a process. You cannot renege. We'll say Amar Beis va'Amar Rav Dimi Berei Rav Nachman Berei Rav Yosef Kigon dekabli alei bechad. What's the case? The case ultimately again is halacha l'maisa again. If you look at Rashi says over Arav Dimi, hadik tani neman alai abal kigon dekabli alei bechad dayan v'yishnaim ksherin imo. So we'll say, so the case over here is where the father was accepted as a single witness, and we're all saying, what do we see? We see Allah three neg. So again, the Gemara says, so why teach me the same halacha twice? In other words, so you're teaching me again that you could accept an eid echad and you could vest him with two witness power. Same that you could accept Reuven's father as a dayan. Okay, so essentially what you're saying is, in any legal proceedings, parties could agree to accept something as legally binding, even though what? Even though normally it would not be legally binding, right? So you could accept a relative as a judge, even though a relative was normally disqualified as a judge. So too, you could accept the testimony of one witness, vest him with two witness credibility. Rabbi Meir says, if you subsequently change your mind, you could renege, and the Chum say you can't. So I need to teach the same halacha twice. So if we were to just taught the case of the father, accepting the father as a judge, I would have said that's the case where the Rabbanan say you can't renege. Why? Mishum da'aba va'avicha chazul la'alma. Because when Reuven and Shimon, let's say, accept Reuven's father as a judge, perhaps the reason why the Rabbanan say they can't renege is because Reuven's father is fit for a judge. He could be a dayan. Now, generally, not in this case. Why? Not in this case. Why? Because he is related to one of the parties, right? But in a general case, he would be believed. Aval chad kibeitrei de la'alma lo chazi ema modulei Rabbi Meir. But in a case of accepting the testimony of one witness, so again, in general, we'll say one witness is never credible, right? One witness is never believed, and therefore maybe halacha l'maisa he should not be vested with credibility at all. And therefore, maybe the Rabbanan would agree with Rabbi Meir that you can renege. Baha come Rabbi Meir, or if we're just in the second case, this case Rabbi Meir says his position that you could renege. But perhaps in the other case, he would agree with the Rabbanan that you can't renege. Therefore, therefore they're both needed. So therefore, both say. So bottom line, the ticket over here is as follows. What's being introduced to us is the following idea. So that halacha l'maisa, and this is really fascinating, that in the abstract, there are certain things that work in legal proceedings, right? So a judge has to look a certain way. A testimonial unit has to be comprised of two witnesses. If the parties agree to accept a different standard of adjudication, right? So if the parties agree, we agree to allow Reuven's father to serve as one of our dayanim. It works. We agree to accept the testimony of one witness. It works. It works. Why? Because both parties are committing to it. Now, the shaila is after you agreed to that process, can you back out? Can you say, no, I no longer accept Reuven's father as a judge. I no longer accept testimony of one witness. So that's the machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says yes, because since you agreed to a compromised judicial process, therefore what? Therefore you have the right to go ahead and renege on it. The Chum say no. Once you commit to the process, you can't get out. So both say, by the way, it's such a fundamental life machlokes as well in terms of like how do you view life commitments? Do you view your life commitments as non-negotiable, or are they negotiable, right? Rabbi Meir says, even though you committed to this process, there's an exit ramp. You can get off. You could renege. Chum say, no, once you commit to a process, see it through to the end. Fundamental life machlokes as well. All right, so that's the machlokes over here. So let's go weiter. Let's finish up. I'm sorry. Dainu, the Seifa Edav, Alma Dafka Katani. So let's say, so now here's what's interesting. So now if you notice, by the way, so the Reisha is talking about a case of a judge, and the Seifa is talking about a case of witnesses. So apparently the cases are what we'll call case specific. Rabbi Lazar, Bidvahu ve'echal poslan. What are we talking about? We're talking about a case where ultimately, again, one of the litigants and another individual comes to invalidate them. So the Gemara says, Kol kamine, how could it be believed? No gebe edusahu. How could one of the litigants ultimately come along and invalidate one of the witnesses? I will say, again, that should be a conflict of interest, right? So in other words, if Reuven is one of the parties to the din, and now Shimon's bring witnesses, and now Reuven and another witness come to invalidate Shimon's witnesses, how would that work? How could Reuven be believed to discredit some of Shimon's witnesses? Reuven is considered to have a conflict of interest because he's one of the litigants to the case. To which the Gemara says, so the case is where the witness in question already there was some cloud there was some some objection, some other objection raised to his fitness as a witness. Se'ir demai, what kind of issue we have over here? The guy's lanusa. Say if it was that the witness that Shimon brought was accused of being a thief, then kol kamine nogeh be'edusahu. Ela iror te pegam mishpacha. So what's the issue over here? The issue over here is that the witness that Shimon brought had a secondary issue, namely pegam mishpacha. There was some issue in his lineage. So Rabbi Meir says, Hani amishpacha kamasadi v'yimamela kapasal. So again, Rabbi Meir holds that therefore when Reuven, one of the litigants, comes along and testifies about Shimon's genealogical issue, he's not really testifying about his case. He's testifying about a separate genealogical issue, and therefore again, even though he's one of the litigants and one of the parties to the case, he should be believed. The Rabbanan Savri, sof nogeh be'idusahu. The Rabbanan, on the other hand, say, while it's true that Reuven, one of the litigants, is testifying to a genealogical issue that Shimon has, and technically speaking, that genealogical issue is not really part of the current case to which Reuven is a litigant, but nevertheless, the impact of his testimony is that it has an impact on the case in which Reuven is a litigant, and therefore that's called nogeh bedavar. Okay? So Mar says, Kias Rav Dimi. The machlokes ultimately again is when you have two sets of witnesses. Rabbi Meir says sarach levarer. Rabbi Meir says ultimately. So if you take a look at Rashi for just a moment, take a look at Rashi. But machlokes shtei kitei edim. So like this. So I'll say just before we go on, just to understand. I apologize. I know we're going quickly, but just to understand what's happening over here. So first of all, we've clarified the first case of the Mishnah. Right now we've clarified. Then what does it mean when it says dinei mamonish b'shlosha ze bar lo echad ze bar lo echad? What is that talking about? That's talking about a case where Reuven and Shimon have a monetary dispute. Reuven and Shimon cannot agree on a beis din. So what's the process? Reuven chooses a judge, Shimon chooses a judge, and then what? Those two choose a third. And again, the Gemara says we like that because everyone feels heard. Everyone feels heard. Everyone feels kind of they have someone on their team, and that's a good way to make sure that the proper judgment comes out. So that's the first halacha. Now what we're mired in is the following discussion. We're mired in the following is that this fundamental machlokes Chachamim and Rabbi Meir about what power do the parties have over each other's witnesses or each other's judges. So we've clarified the second part also. When can you invalidate a judge? Only if you could prove that either he's really puzzle, and what does really puzzle mean? He's a relative, he's a gambler, right? Whatever, some real invalidation, or he's related to one of the parties, right? That's real. But if you have a judge that has been accepted by the general population as a judge, even though he's not the greatest Talmid Chacham, that endows him with mumcha status, with expert status, and therefore cannot be invalidated. Now we're trying to figure out under what circumstances can you invalidate the witnesses of the other side. So that's what we're trying to figure out over here. So how could Reuven invalidate Shimon's witnesses, and how could Shimon invalidate Reuven's witnesses? That's what we're trying to figure out of this. Okay, so now back to this. Now we're caught up. The machlokes when you have two sets of witnesses. What's the machlokes here? Take a look at Rashi. So I both say this is fascinating. This is really fascinating. So the case over here is where, watch this. Reuven comes along and Reuven says, let's at least begin this today. I have two sets of witnesses to support my cause. See what's happening? Now one, two sets of witnesses. And Reuven is coming to Beis and claiming, I have two sets of witnesses to support my cause. Now watch this. Rashi, right? B'davar zeh, so Shamar Baldin b'fanenu yesh li shtei kitei edim b'davar zeh hevi kat rishona v'amat halova v'achar v'amar psulin hein dahashta lav kinogeh be'edosu shari amar malva sheish lo kat acheres then bikesh v'lo matzah yafsid. So now what ends up happening? Reuven brings his first set, and Shimon says, oh no, that first set, they're invalid. So Shabbos says, so now what ends up happening? So now what ends up happening is Shimon is unable to go ahead and bring his second set. So now look at the Gemara for just a moment. Let's at least begin this. Actually, we'll say, you know what? We'll stop over for today. We'll pick up. We rushed enough. Right? We'll pick up him, Yetz Hashem, with this case. I know. Sorry about the pace. We'll say, but again, so just to say what we're picking up with tomorrow, trying to figure out under what circumstances could one party invalidate the witnesses of the other party? Because after all, that type of invalidation always seems to be that the invalidating, right, the litigant that's going to invalidate is going to be Nogeh Be'edus. He has a conflict of interest. Because obviously, Reuven is going to try to invalidate Shimon's witnesses. Why? Because he doesn't want Shimon to have witnesses. So doesn't that create the conflict of interest? So trying to figure out a case where halacha l'maisa, one litigant could invalidate the witnesses of the other litigant without it being a conflict of interest. And the to be continued tomorrow. Shkoyach.
Amen.